Hi, I'm Don Hahn, and we're going to talk a little bit about this document called An Exposure Sheet, and about the amazing contributions of the camera department in the making of Snow White, and in particular, a scene called Scene 21 of Sequence 2A of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This beautiful scene where Snow White enters the door and runs up into her balcony as the prince is singing in the background.
Hear what I have to say.
The roadmap to that scene and how to put it together from a technical point of view is the exposure sheet. You have to remember that animation wasn't just the art of animation, it was also the technology of animation. It's artwork and technology in equal balance, and that was what was so brilliant about Walt Disney and his artists and technicians. They knew how to innovate, and one of the documents that really proves that is the exposure sheet, and it's really a treasure map to a lot of information about this scene that you may never have known. You see, for example, under the animator box, we have Grim Milt, Grim for Grim Natwick, and he was really kind of the nine old men of that day. And Milt Kahl actually became what we know as one of the nine old men, Walt Disney's amazing kind of cadre of animators. But here, he was animating pigeons. The description of the scene, medium long shot, SW, Snow White runs through the castle and up the stairs and peeks out from behind the curtains, just tells the animator and the camera person and the ink and paint ladies down the line what this scene was about and how it fit into the sequence of the movie. And it also says how long this scene is, which is 16 feet long. Well, that would have been about 10 seconds worth of film. Each line on an X sheet is equal to 1 frame of film. This was actually made so that it could be pinned or clamped next to the animator's drawing board. So if I'm sitting here drawing, this could fit next to my drawing board and I could reach over and put numbers on it. The numbers would indicate drawing numbers. Now, there's 5 columns from right to left, numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and those are the columns of artwork. Now, when you're filming an animated film and the camera points straight down onto a table, and so these actually are the levels of artwork underneath that table. So level 1 is the background, the layout drawing. Level 2 is called out here as a door and Snow White, and then there's some pigeons. Column 3, it says DX shadows. DX would stand for double expose. And what that meant is this scene actually had to be shot twice under camera. You would shoot the whole scene with the shutter set at 40%. And for the shadow underneath Snow White, you would have a completely black little ink blob. And then you would wind the film back to the first frame. And then you would shoot it again without that little black shadow under Snow White and open the shutter up to shoot the other 60%. To get a natural looking shadow, they tried out 30% exposure. They decided to up it a little bit so the shadow was a little bit darker and make it 40% exposure. Over here on the far left, there's a column that says dialogue, and that's pretty interesting because you can actually see what was being said by a character during that scene. And here it says, offstage Prince, frame 24, the letter F, and frame 25, the letter I. So you can tell from this dialogue column what's going on in the dialogue in the film. The dialogue, that was actually written in by an editor. All these camera movements have been written in by a layout person, and that layout person wrote in the size of the camera field, what the camera would see, and place in any of the other camera movements. So this is a document that everybody weighed in on, and when it finally arrived in camera, it was the Bible. You didn't deviate from this because this told you how to put all these moving parts together into something that would make a scene in the movie. There were about 1,300 scenes in Snow White, so this is one of only 1,300 exposure sheets. This sheet would have gone to the camera department where it would hang on a clipboard next to the cameraman's position at the camera, and a cameraman would go through and set up the door, Snow White, the overlays. You would shoot a frame, take everything off, put on everything else for the second frame, shoot a frame, take everything off, put everything back on for the third frame, shoot a frame, and so on for 130, 150 frames. There's 5 levels of artwork. So you have somewhere near 1,000 pieces of artwork that go into the making of this scene. When you look at the numbers and columns here, you'll notice next to the numbers, there's little pinpricks. Well, that's back in 1937. They would have used just a push pin to keep track of the individual frames. Now, keep in mind, it would take a day or 2 or 3 to shoot a scene like this, and things would happen. The electricity would go out, a light bulb would burn out. You might come to a piece of artwork that was scratched, and you have to rewind the film, throw it out, and start from the very first frame. It says over here a lot of important instructions in the camera instructions column. There's a start of a camera move here. It says start a pan on the top pegs to the left. Pan starts on the camera. Bottom pegs stay at center. A pan means the artwork is actually sliding back and forth on animation pegs. The pegs would have been on a set of bars on top of the artwork and bottom of the artwork. So you have 2 bars on top, 2 bars on the bottom, all moving at different speeds. There was a department called scene planning that would plan out all these camera moves. So they would plan out these little numbers and do these mathematical equations to make sure that the camera moved at the right speed. So here you see the pegs on the background art would have to move 1/16 of an inch, then they would move 3/16 of an inch, and then 1/4 of an inch, and then every frame after the background art would move 1/4 of an inch every frame. So this is a little slow, and it would slowly move, then faster, 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 and by the time you got to this frame, it was moving 1/4 of an inch every frame. It really is the perfect meeting of technology and artwork to make a scene like this work. But there's one more piece of paper back here, which is possibly the most interesting piece of paper in this exposure sheet document. If I turn this back, hidden in the back here, it's a little blue slip of paper that says retake order. And it says here, the negative was defective. So when they shot this scene for the first time after all that work, there was a negative defect. They had to shoot it again, and look at the date. December 15th, 1937. The movie came out within days of that. It makes me think even that when the movie was premiered at the Carthay Circle Theater, maybe this shot wasn't in its final negative form, and they actually cut it in after the premiere at the Carthay Circle. So this retake order is a spectacular piece of history that shows how close to the finish line these guys were working on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So that's a little history of that scene, scene 21 of sequence 2A, and you can see it all in the pages, this amazing camera document, the exposure sheet, created for the camera department on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.